wedding feast. Jesus often told stories to help his friends understand how much God loves us all. This is one of the stories Jesus told. Once there was a king who was getting ready for his son's wedding. In the palace, everyone was talking about the happy couple and what a lovely wedding it would be. When everything was ready for the wedding feast, Nehemiah, the king's steward, who rather liked telling people what to do, got out his list of people who had been invited. Importantly, he read out all the names, and the servants went off to visit each one. The first servant went to Rafi's house.
"The wedding feast is ready,"
he said.
"The king is waiting to welcome you."
But Rafi said,
"I'm sorry, but I won't be able to come after all. It's been a very busy time on the farm, and I have many things to do. Please give the king my apologies."
The second servant went to Gaby's house.
"The wedding feast is ready,"
he said.
"The king is waiting to welcome you."
But Gaby said,
"I'm sorry, but I won't be able to come after all. I've just moved into a new shop, and there's so much to do. Please give my apologies to the king."
The third servant went to find Danny on his farm.
"The wedding feast is ready,"
he said.
"The king is waiting to welcome you."
But Danny said,
"I'm sorry, but I won't be able to come after all. I haven't fed my oxen yet, and their stall needs a good clean out too. Please give the king my apologies."
The fourth servant went to Manny's house.
"The wedding feast is ready,"
he said.
"The king is waiting to welcome you." "Go away,"
said Manny.
"It isn't very long since my own wedding, and I'm far too busy to come to the wedding of the king's son. Tell the king I would come if I could."
One by one, the servants told the king the excuses that the guests had made for not being able to come to the wedding feast after all. The king was very cross.
"But everything is ready,"
he said.
"We must have some guests. Go out into the streets and invite anybody you can find. Bring in the poor, the deaf, the lame and the blind."
The servants ran off in all directions. They searched the streets and asked anybody who was deaf, or lame, or blind if they would like to come to the wedding of the king's son. The people who were deaf or lame or blind were very pleased. They tidied themselves up and went to the palace. Then the servants looked up and down the alleyways, in and out of houses. They ran here and there, searching far and wide, asking all the poor people they could find.
"Would you like to come to the wedding of the king's son?"
The poor people were very pleased. They tidied themselves up and went to the palace. The servants went back to see the king.
"Well done,"
said the king.
"We have lots of guests now, but there are still some empty places. Go out into the countryside and find more people to come to the feast. I want my house to be full. If the people I invited are making excuses to stay away, I'll look for others who want to come."
The servants ran off to the country as fast as they could. They searched all the fields and orchards, all the roads and hedges, behind the trees and in the ditches. They invited everyone they could find to the wedding feast. Back at the palace, the king was looking happier and happier. All the seats were filled with people and the food on the table looked delicious. Though many of them were very poor, the people had tried hard to look their best. They brushed their hair, washed their faces and tidied themselves up in honour of the wedding of the king's son. The only thing that upset the king now was that one of the guests had made no effort to tidy himself up. His hair was a mess, his clothes were dirty, and altogether he looked as if he couldn't care less. The king sent that man away. The crowd who had gathered to hear Jesus speak liked the story very much, but of course they wanted to know what it meant. Jesus explained that the king was like God, our Father in heaven. He invited people to his house because he loved them. The people who love God will come when he calls. They won't make excuses. He invites all of us. Will you come? This story can be found in Luke chapter 14, verses 15 to 26.